friends. But,
oh, you are?
But I am, yeah. My mom, they were gonna name me Catherine, but my older sister's Jacqueline, and they thought that might be too confusing for babies to figure out.
Yeah.
And so
it's become increasingly clear that almost no one can tolerate the star of this movie anymore, and the reasons for that rejection are written all over her own words and actions. Rachel Zegler has managed to alienate nearly every part of the fan base, from lifelong Disney lovers to casual audiences who simply wanted to see a respectful remake of a classic. Instead of generating excitement, her public comments and interviews have created frustration, disappointment, and even anger. She has repeatedly mocked the original Snow White story, calling it outdated and problematic, as if she's ashamed to be part of it. Rather than embracing the beloved fairy tale and its timeless message, she's tried to reinvent it into something unrecognizable. And the audience isn't buying it. The movie itself heavily focuses on her character's love story, a storyline that centers on a man who quite literally stalks her. It's strange, uncomfortable, and tonally confusing. What was once an innocent fairy tale about love and kindness has been turned into a cynical, almost bitter commentary on gender politics. The result is something so far removed from what people expect that it's hard to believe Disney approved it. Honestly, she needs to go. I'm sorry, Disney, but this is a casting disaster that needs to be undone before it sinks your entire remake strategy. Rachel Zegler presents herself as a performer with a mission, but not the kind audiences asked for. Her attitude has become the main story, overshadowing everything else. She's confident to the point of arrogance, often proclaiming that anyone who disagrees with her should simply unfollow her or stop supporting her work. That kind of smug entitlement is jarring, especially coming from someone who didn't write, direct, or create the story she's criticizing. She's an actor hired to play a role, not the author of a social manifesto. Yet she treats Snow White as her personal platform to lecture the audience, forgetting that storytelling is supposed to invite people in, not push them away. The backlash hasn't come out of nowhere. It's the natural reaction to a combination of tone-deaf remarks and self-inflicted PR disasters. Many film commentators have called this one of the worst casting decisions in the history of Hollywood. Not just because she doesn't fit the visual or emotional image of Snow White, but because she seems to despise the very essence of the character. She often talks about how Snow White doesn't need a prince, as if empowerment only exists in rejecting romance. But audiences didn't want a feminist manifesto. They wanted a fairy tale that celebrated innocence, love, and beauty. At the same time, Rachel has publicly complained about receiving backlash and even threats, saying she can have fun while wishing people would stop sending hate. Mommy, it's a contradictory stance that reveals something deeper, a sense of internal conflict and instability. Like so many in Hollywood today, she confuses activism with authenticity and attention with respect. She sees herself as a voice of progress, but to many viewers, she comes across as ungrateful, bitter, and out of touch. This is why many people are now calling for a boycott of the film. Not out of malice, but out of exhaustion. Disney once represented magic, innocence, and imagination, but with this casting and this tone, it feels more like a political statement than a movie. Disney fired Gina Carano for far less controversy, yet they continue to stand by an actress who insults their fans and belittles their legacy. It's hypocrisy, plain and simple. And the problem doesn't stop with Rachel. Gal Gadot's casting as the evil queen is another mismatch that completely undermines the story. The queen's jealousy of Snow White's beauty is a crucial part of the original fairy tale. But it's almost laughable to imagine Gal Gadot, one of the most strikingly beautiful women in Hollywood, being envious of Rachel Zegler. Even in a world with magic mirrors, dwarfs, and talking animals, that's a stretch. It breaks the suspension of disbelief that's necessary for any fantasy film to work. Behind the scenes, the production has been a nightmare. Rachel's viral interviews, leaks from the Daily Mail, and behind-the-scenes reports of creative tension have all painted a picture of chaos. What Disney hoped would be a secretive, surprise-filled relaunch of a timeless story has instead turned into a PR crisis that keeps spiraling out of control. Audiences have already made up their minds before even seeing the film, and not in Disney's favor. Now both of the film's leads, Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, are facing enormous backlash. Neither of them feels authentic in their roles, and the chemistry between them seems non-existent. What should have been a dream project celebrating? The legacy of Snow White has instead become a cautionary tale about arrogance, poor casting, and corporate hubris. The message is loud and clear. When studios forget who their audience is and let ego drive the story, even a fairy tale can turn into a nightmare. Rachel Zegler once said, "I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online." That line alone perfectly captures the tone of everything that followed. A sense of entitlement, frustration, and disconnect from the audience that once adored Disney's magic. In response, Disney Plus made a move that spoke volumes without uttering a single word. Without any announcement, fanfare, or even a quiet teaser, the company quietly pulled Snow White from its upcoming digital release schedule. No streaming date, no countdown, no marketing push, just complete silence. For a company as massive and media-savvy as Disney, this kind of retreat is almost unprecedented. When Disney refuses to promote one of its own live-action remakes, it's not an accident, it's a statement. It shows a level of internal panic, embarrassment, or both. And at the center of it all stands Rachel Zegler, whose every word seems to make things worse. What started as a high-budget fairy tale reboot has turned into a public relations disaster. The more Rachel tries to defend her movie, the more she alienates people. Every attempt she makes to justify her version of Snow White, to frame it as a modern, empowered story, ends up backfiring, making Disney look even more tone-deaf. It's not just bad for Bob Iger or for the studio's leadership, it's damaging what little remains of Disney's wholesome family image. After the box office disaster and the endless wave of online backlash, Disney executives reportedly decided to cut their losses. According to multiple insider reports, they quietly decided to delay or even cancel the streaming debut altogether. Why? Because they're afraid. Afraid of reliving the same meme storm, the same avalanche of negative press, and the same social media chaos that followed the theatrical release. Industry whispers suggest the company feared mass subscription, cancellations on Disney Plus if they gave audiences another chance to hate watch the movie. It's gotten so bad that even the premiere itself was scaled back. Imagine that, a major Disney live-action remake, and instead of the usual red carpet spectacle, the event was toned down, almost hidden. Why? Because, as one executive allegedly put it, Rachel Zegler is a PR nightmare. This entire situation didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's been snowballing for months, long before the film even hit theaters. Rachel's own interviews created a media firestorm. Instead of promoting the movie with grace and enthusiasm, she went viral for all the wrong reasons. Every clip, every soundbite, every dismissive comment became another spark for outrage. In one widely shared moment, she laughed about never watching the original Snow White, calling it creepy and outdated. In another, she mocked the prince's role, calling him a guy who literally stalks her. Then she followed it up by proudly saying, "So, we didn't do that this time." Those words, meant to sound modern and empowering, landed like a slap in the face to generations of Disney fans who grew up loving the very story she was mocking. Rachel even explained that her version of Snow White isn't going to be saved by the prince and isn't dreaming about true love, but instead dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be. While that message might sound empowering on paper, in context it came across as arrogant, dismissive, and completely out of touch with what audiences wanted from a fairy tale. Disney's response, quietly shelving the movie's digital release, says it all. This wasn't just about damage control, it was an act of retreat. It marks not only a failed launch, but a complete abandonment of faith in the project. What was supposed to be a crown jewel in Disney's lineup has become a symbol of everything wrong with the company's recent direction. Corporate overreach, misplaced messaging, and a star who refuses to stop talking long enough to let the movie speak for itself. At this point, even industry insiders are joking about how predictable the outcome was. As one commentator quipped online, "Oh wow, Snow White flopped." Who's surprised? After all, when you cast one of the least genuine, most out of touch, and most disliked personalities in Hollywood as your lead, what did you expect? The tragedy of it all is that Snow White was once Disney's purest symbol, the story that started it all back in 1937. A tale about innocence, kindness, and love conquering evil. Now, nearly a century later, that same story has been twisted into a corporate lesson about arrogance, bad marketing, and how not to handle a PR crisis. What was meant to be a revival of Disney magic has instead become a warning to Hollywood. No amount of rebranding can save a film or a company, when the audience no longer believes in the story being told. They weren't just disappointing, they were downright insulting. Rachel Zegler's comments about Snow White didn't simply spark debate, they lit a cultural firestorm. Social media erupted overnight with side-by-side comparisons between the original 1937 princess, graceful, innocent, and adored, and Rachel's modern, flippant version, who seemed to roll her eyes at everything that made the classic so beloved. The tone-deaf remarks became instant meme fuel, and the public's nostalgia quickly turned into disbelief. By the time Snow White finally limped into theaters, the excitement was gone. Audiences weren't showing up with love and anticipation, they were showing up with receipts. Some came just to witness the train wreck for themselves, while many others stayed home entirely. What should have been a celebration of Disney heritage turned into an online autopsy of how far the company had drifted from its own magic. Then came what fans now call the royalties moment. During what was meant to be a lighthearted interview about streaming and modern film releases, Rachel leaned forward with a completely serious expression and declared, "I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online. There are 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess." That one sentence broke the internet. Within hours, social media was flooded with parody videos, sarcastic tweets, and endless commentary mocking her statement. People were stunned that someone starring in a multi-million-dollar Disney production could complain about compensation before the movie had even premiered. To many, it wasn't just a bad look. It was proof that Rachel was out of touch, entitled, and completely unaware of the room she was speaking to. That quote became symbolic, not just of a PR blunder, but of a deeper problem. It reinforced the perception that Rachel wasn't invested in the story, the character, or the fans. She was invested in herself. The idea that she made such a bold financial statement before the film's release made it seem like she cared more about her paycheck than the project she was supposed to represent. Even her co-star Gal Gadot seemed uncomfortable. During interviews and appearances, her body language said everything words couldn't. The most infamous moment came during their Oscars presentation. As the pair stood on stage, delivering lines about the magic of visual effects, their work makes the impossible seem possible, creating worlds that wrap their arms around our imaginations. There was no eye contact, no connection, and no warmth. Rachel forced a smile that disappeared almost instantly, while Gal looked like she wanted to be anywhere else. Behind the scenes, insiders later revealed that Gal had already distanced herself from Rachel during press events. She fulfilled her contractual obligations, but beyond that, she kept her interactions to a minimum. Industry watchers didn't miss the signs. Gal's silence spoke volumes. She had nothing to gain by associating herself with a controversy that had already spiraled out of control. What Disney likely hoped would be a display of star synergy instead became a live demonstration of awkward tension and fractured chemistry. And then came the rewrite. Rachel proudly promoted her version of Snow White as a bold, feminist reimagining, one without a prince, without romance, and even without the dwarfs. She promised that this new version would speak to modern audiences and empower young women. But instead of applause, her comments drew backlash from longtime fans who felt she was rewriting history, not refreshing it. In interviews, Rachel tried to justify her take. Snow White gets her name not from the fairness of her skin. As we obviously know, that wouldn't make sense. But from surviving a snowstorm. This version teaches the real meaning of fairness. Fairness of heart, fairness of how you treat others. She went on to explain that fairness is not about how you look, but about what's inside, calling it a message that's been carried on for almost 90 years. But for many, her words rang hollow, like a corporate talking point dressed up as inspiration. It felt less like she was sharing a story and more like she was delivering a lecture. Yes, stories can and should evolve, but evolution requires understanding, not rejection. The magic of the original Snow White wasn't just in its message, it was in its heart, its innocence, and its sincerity. This remake, however, seemed desperate to prove a point rather than tell one. The fairy tale charm had been replaced by corporate messaging. The emotion had been replaced by ego. Disney, once the master of blending heart with moral lessons, seemed to have completely missed the balance this time, and Rachel became the unwilling, or perhaps unaware, face of that failure. Every soundbite, every viral clip, every awkward interview became another crack in the film's fragile image. By the time the dust settled, the backlash was no longer about one actress or one movie. It had become something larger, a reflection of how audiences felt about Hollywood's current direction. People weren't just tired of remakes. They were tired of being lectured, talked down to, and told that beloved classics needed fixing. Disney could edit trailers, delete posts, and shift release dates, but they couldn't fix the damage done to their audience's trust. The backlash wasn't just about a film anymore. It was about what that film represented, a once magical studio losing sight of its own story. It wasn't just about a miscast actress or a movie that fell short of expectations. It was about how the lead actress herself managed to unravel decades of legacy with a few interviews and a handful of viral moments. Rachel Zegler didn't just play Snow White, she reframed her. She turned a timeless fairy tale about innocence, kindness, and resilience into a modern sermon on empowerment that alienated nearly everyone who grew up loving the original. She mocked the story's romance, ridiculed the idea of a prince, and positioned herself as someone far above the audience that made Disney the cultural empire it is. For a studio built on nostalgia, that was a disaster waiting to happen. Disney doesn't make sudden moves. It calculates, tests, and projects. So when the whispers began that Snow White might not even get a wide release, it was more than a corporate decision. It was a silent admission of defeat. The executives knew that streaming this version of Snow White could do more harm than good. Not to the box office, but to Disney's reputation itself. The brand that once sold dreams was now staring at a PR nightmare that refused to fade. Rachel Zegler had become a headline, not for her acting, not for her singing, but for her attitude. Overnight, she transformed from a rising star into the cautionary tale of modern celebrity culture. Her every comment was dissected, her every statement turned into meme fuel. And as Disney scrambled to protect its most sacred crown jewel, it became clear that they weren't just trying to save a movie, they were trying to save their identity. By the time Snow White finally limped into theaters, the damage was irreversible. The marketing couldn't recover the lost goodwill. The trailers were mocked, the red carpet interviews replayed like bloopers, and the fan base, once loyal and protective, had turned hostile. Disney's once untouchable image was bruised. Fans were openly furious, and Rachel Zegler had become more recognized for her arrogance and controversy than for any performance she'd ever given. But that was only the beginning. Because the real horror of this story wasn't found within the film's 2-hour runtime, it existed in everything that happened after the cameras stopped rolling. When the box office numbers dropped, they didn't disappoint. They imploded. Snow White opened with a staggering low of $45 million and an almost unbelievable 1.6 rating on IMDb. That wasn't a stumble, it was a collapse. It didn't just fail to take off. It tripped over its own expectations and hit the ground face first. And the worst part? No one gasped. No one was shocked. The entire internet saw it coming like a slow-motion car crash that everyone had been warning about for months. The box office disaster wasn't an accident. It was a scheduled event. Fans had made up their minds long before release day. They didn't boycott quietly. They celebrated the downfall. The moment reviews went live, social media erupted into chaos. Reaction videos, memes, and breakdowns flooded timelines. People were live streaming their laughter, not their excitement. Before opening night had even ended, Snow White had transformed from a fairy tale reboot into an industry punchline, the first ever anti-fairy tale fairy tale. And Disney somehow had managed to create the impossible, a princess movie that audiences united against. It wasn't bold, it wasn't empowering, and it wasn't misunderstood. It was rejected. A glittering train wreck dressed in royal gowns and marketing slogans. Then came the twist that made things even stranger, the OnlyFans curveball. Out of nowhere, an AI-generated Rachel Zegler profile appeared on the platform, racking up thousands of followers in mere hours. It wasn't verified, it wasn't real, but for a moment, the internet wasn't sure, and that hesitation spoke volumes. Public opinion of Rachel had reached such a bizarre intersection between fascination and fatigue that people genuinely wondered if this was her next move. Her fans tried to downplay it as a cruel, sexist hoax. Her critics used it as another reason to mock her. Either way, the incident became a symbol of just how far her image had fallen, from Disney royalty to digital controversy. The internet wasn't laughing with her anymore. It was laughing at her. Behind the scenes, Disney executives were in full-blown crisis mode. This wasn't another weak remake like Mulan or The Little Mermaid. This was a corporate disaster unfolding in real time. Theater chains began dropping the movie from primetime slots, replacing it with safer titles that could actually sell tickets. Family matinees were quietly pulled. Evening showings were scaled back. In some cities, Snow White was so buried in the schedule that you practically needed a map to find it. It was cinematic exile, the kind of silent embarrassment studios never talk about publicly. And just as the dust started to settle, an older story from Rachel's past began to resurface: the forgotten Wicked feud. Long before she wore Snow White's crown, Rachel had reportedly been circling the role of Elphaba in the Wicked adaptation. She teased it online, hinted through song clips, and dropped cryptic posts that fueled speculation. But according to insiders, her audition process became a red flag showcase. She overperformed, interrupted, and projected the same impulsive, self-centered energy that later defined her Snow White press tour. The Wicked producer saw the storm coming, and unlike Disney, they decided to walk away before it hit. Now, Rachel Zegler's career isn't just struggling, it's frozen midair, suspended between fame and infamy. Once praised as a breakthrough talent from West Side Story, she's now a textbook case of what happens when charisma turns into arrogance and authenticity into ego. Her downfall isn't tied to one bad decision. It's the accumulation of many. Every tweet, every interview, every viral moment stitched together into a single narrative that she misread her audience and misunderstood her power. What makes it almost tragic is that she still doesn't seem to realize it. She's still online, still speaking about empowerment and being true to herself, while the world around her grows quieter. Studios aren't calling, co-stars aren't defending, fans aren't engaging. And the silence that follows her every move is louder than any controversy she's ever caused. Hollywood isn't heartless, it's strategic. It rewards who it can trust, and it distances itself from those who don't learn. Right now, it's doing the math on whether Rachel Zegler is worth the risk. From Disney's next princess to social media's favorite cautionary tale, her fall didn't happen in one night. It happened frame by frame, clip by clip, until one of the most anticipated reboots of the decade transformed into a cultural autopsy. And in the most ironic twist imaginable, this story doesn't end with a prince, a kiss, or a happy ending. It ends with a lesson, a reminder that in Hollywood, being the fairest of them all isn't about rewriting the story. It's about knowing when to stop talking before the fairy tale becomes a warning label.